My pleasure is to bring up Ty Bennett. And as he starts to make his way to this small stage, let me just give you a brief introduction. Ty Bennett has been with Strongbrook since day one, which is about 8 years-ish. And he's been a specialist in the real estate side as the fulfillment behind-the-scenes guy who does basically all the deals. There's not a deal that comes in through Strongbrook that doesn't go through him. But on an aside, he owns the largest day spa in Utah County, managing over 100 employees. And I say that because I'm expecting like a free coupon or something before I go. But I'm here to tell you, with his few minutes up here to give you an update, he is so much broader, so much smarter, so much deeper than just a real estate guru, as he's now starting to participate in a large way with we or us mentors. And it's a pleasure to be on the stage with him. I wish I didn't have to leave. God bless you. I shall see you again in a few minutes to introduce Laurel. But here's Ty Bennett.
So when I saw the agenda for tonight, I looked at Chris. Are you kidding me? You're putting me between Dan Clark and Laurel Langmeyer? And so I thought, oh, I've got to get an impressive intro video. And so I worked, paid a lot of people a lot of money, and I put together a video. It would have blown Dan's out of the water. But then they told me it had to be true. So I had to throw that out. But no, it's an honor to be here tonight. And every year we do this wealth workshop. And I want to recognize our clients. Who are our transactional PSA clients in the room? Raise your hands. Give them a hand. Probably almost half of the room. I'm sure many people that are watching online tonight are clients as well. And we want to talk a little bit about real estate. I'm sure that's what you expect when you see me come up on the stage, is real estate. And they never give me enough time to get all the information that I want to out about real estate, but I'm going to try. I like to operate business by one of the rules in which I operate business is what I call the triple win. And what that means for me is the customer has to win, the employees have to win, and the employer, the business, has to win. And if you think about it, you can't really have a combination of one or two of those three. If you have a happy customer, happy employees, good culture, they feel like they're compensated, commensurate for what they put into it, but a business that's not profitable, it's not going to last. You surely can't have unhappy customers and happy employees in a profitable business, and it's not going to sustain. We take that same approach in real estate, and what I want to talk about tonight is the 3 W's to the winning formula in real estate. And what are those? Where, when, and why. How do we determine where we buy? How do we determine when? Timing's everything. And why? What's the strategy that we're employing in the markets that we're buying in? You think of where. A lot of people say, oh, there's 3 keys to successful real estate investing. Location, location, and location. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's one of the 3. But you can buy in the right place, you can buy the wrong product, surely, and you can buy at the wrong time. Or you can buy the right product at the right time in the right place and have the wrong strategy in place. And you don't necessarily win in the long term. So I'm going to talk about each of those and talk about a few of the markets that we're buying in and show some examples. September 15th, 2008. This date's pretty significant to me. It may not be to many of you. You may not know what that is. That picture, that's the Lehman Brothers office building in New York City. That's the day they filed the largest bankruptcy in US history. That building later sold through bankruptcy liquidation for $960 million. It's a pretty expensive corporate building. But where was I during this time? I was a loan officer, primarily, and that's what I was doing. Owned a mortgage company, and I'd been in the industry for about 5 years and personally written over $250 million in loans. I was very fortunate. It was a great time to get into the loan industry. Then my job got a lot harder as a result of this day because the lending criteria, of course, changed. But I remember it because I had one specific family, a loan in my pipeline that I was working on, and they were living in a hotel. And if you're a loan officer or a real estate agent and the client is living in a hotel, that just equals pressure. What had happened is I'd done a construction loan for them about 7 months before, and the builder was behind. Go figure. right? And so they'd sold their house, arranged to rent it back for 30 days, and they had planned to move into their new house during that 30-day time frame, stress-free, and everything was supposed to work. Well, I had the loan done, but we didn't have the certificate of occupancy, and the appraiser had to go back and finish some final inspections. Well, long story short, that loan never got done. The bank that we were with, it was a jumbo mortgage. The criteria changed instantly. I tried to take it to other banks, and we were never able to get it done. They moved into their house in the construction loan, high interest rate. Eventually, it ballooned, it got called, and they ended up losing the house. And I remember that day, family of 4, and their world really changed. And when you think about what caused that, the housing bubble was a big contributor to that. I Googled for this, run on the bank, Great Recession images. And they popped up, there's tons of them. All over the world of pictures like this. IndyMac Bank is the bank I happen to have the construction loan with, so I wanted to search them out. But lines of people were rushing the banks to get their money. And so what does that mean? How did real estate contribute to that? And why is it so important that we have all those 3 W's and that they line up? If you look at this chart here, this is the growth of private debt. Look what happened from the late 90s to 2010. The green is consumer debt. You have business debt and then non-financial. Look at that green. So during the growth of the economy, people were borrowing money. When you borrow money, you produce a lot of income. There's loan officers, there's appraisers, there's processors, there's title companies, there's inspectors, rehab people. There's a lot of commissions that are generated and a lot of good that goes towards the economy. In fact, that's something we take great pride in over the last 8 years, the amount of real estate that we've done, which is approaching 400 million now, the amount of revenue that we've produced for employees really throughout the entire country. But people were borrowing. Well, when they borrow, especially consumers, when they borrow, they go spend. And unfortunately, people were borrowing home equity and they were consuming it. Garrett talked earlier today about borrowing. Don't borrow to consume, right? Is there good debt and bad debt? Absolutely. Dan talked about my day spa. The only reason that started is because I pulled a home equity line of credit on my townhouse, the first house that my wife and I lived in when we were married. The only way we expanded to a new location was an SBA loan. The only way we bought the place next door and knocked down the wall and expanded again was another SBA loan. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without taking on debt. But it's business debt. I didn't take it out to consume it. I took it out to build it. All right? This is another interesting chart. Maybe a little bit hard to see, but this is the household debt versus disposable income. If you look at leading up in the 90s and early 2000s, it was around 70 to 80%. You look from 2000 to 2010, it got as high as 130%. Obviously, that's a bad formula. If we're borrowing more than we have to pay back, right? So let's look at some houses and the life cycle of some houses. This is an actual client house. This house was built in 2001 in the Phoenix market. It sold for $75,000 in 2001. It sold again for $171,000 in 2004, foreclosed in 2010. Our Strongbrook client bought it for $68,000 in 2011. Right? That market crashed big time. And they just sold it a few months ago for $140,000. Could that have been a really bad property if you didn't have the right timing? You could identify that as a great market to buy in, but with the wrong timing or strategy, that could have been really bad. It was bad for somebody, right? Here's an the picture's right, the verbs, the wording isn't, but this is another house that had a very similar story that was just sold last month by one of our clients. And so this really drives the point of where and when. And I want to use this as a lead into our Orlando market. Many people ask, am I still too late to capture the equity? For those of you that aren't familiar, there are 2 different strategies in real estate. There's an equity and there's a cash flow. And the equity strategy is more of a short-term, get in and get out because there's an opportunity, and the cash flow is more of the long-term play. And we have both right now. Why is there an equity opportunity? Because of that big bubble, because it bursts, and the recovery period. And that period only lasts so long. And so we may have stretches of time throughout working with us for 5 or 10 years where there's not much of an equity play. Because if there's not a recovery going on, then you're just playing speculation if you're trying to play for growth. And we don't really play the speculation game. Okay? So Orlando is one of our equity markets right now where we're still buying in. Many people ask, am I too late? Well, look what happened to Orlando during this time frame. The red line is the unemployment rate in Orlando compared to the national average. And if you look during the peak, when it's at its lowest, so they were lower percentage unemployment than the national average because housing was such a big part of their economy during the boom. So they employed a lot of people. And you see when it crashed and unemployment went high, they went even higher because so many people lost their jobs because they were dependent upon the housing. If you look at some of our cash flow markets at that same chart, there isn't as big of a discrepancy because housing didn't play as big of a role. In Indianapolis, for example, it didn't go up more than 20%, it didn't go down more than 20%. Okay? Orlando, Phoenix, Las Vegas, very, very different. This is employment. And the one I want to point out here is the orange line, the one you see at the bottom that goes way down. That's the construction industry. So you have retail, financial services, manufacturing, healthcare, all these other industries. You can see what happened, but look what happened with construction. Again, because housing was such a key part of their local economy at that time. Orlando's the number 2 state, or number 2 city, excuse me, with over 1 million jobs that's had job growth over the last, I think that's the last 24 months. And the last one I want to show that kind of drives home the point of it's not too late, this is home permits, house permits. If you look, there was about 15,000 per year on average in the early 2000s. Or no, yeah, in the early 2000s. And then you can see it spiked way up above 25,000, okay? And then it dropped, and right now they're at about 10,000 a year. They're about to 60%. If you look at some of the other equity markets, they've pretty much fully recovered on the amount of house permits, if not exceeded where they were pre-bubble levels. And that's because the foreclosure process takes longer in Orlando. So there's still shadow inventory getting pushed out, hence not the demand for new housing. Where in Phoenix and Las Vegas, they're building a lot more aggressively because that inventory has been pushed out. And so that's why we're still recommending Orlando. And we see another 12 to 24 month window of opportunity to continue to have that equity play and part of that recovery process on Orlando. Okay? I want to talk about Indianapolis, cash flow. I mentioned that our cash flow markets are the get-rich-slow strategy. Very, very predictable. But since this is mainly a Utah crowd, at least here live, I want to use them as an example to Utah. You might be surprised if they sell more 2-bedroom houses than 4-bedroom houses in Indianapolis. Right? That doesn't exist in Utah. We have kids in Utah. 2 bedrooms isn't by the time you're 25, you get 3 too many kids for that. And older housing because they don't build a whole lot there. And so the average house, 50, 60, 70 years old. So very interesting to look at where we buy in Indianapolis. If you kind of look at the freeway system, there's almost a circle that you see, and that's primarily where we buy in Indianapolis. This goes through the size of the houses. The average house is 1,000 to about 1,300 square feet. Again, that would feel really small to us. Our average houses are closer to 2,000, 2,200 square feet. The average age of the homes, and I know that's small for you to see, but is closer to 50, 60 years old is the second largest. Over 80 years old is the highest one that you see. Those are your $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 houses. We've chosen not to play in that market, right? But you look at the 10 to 20 years and less than 10 years. So very, very different market there. The average age of the house that we buy in Indianapolis is 1999. So we've chosen to go with the newer houses. For $100,000 in Indianapolis, which is the average purchase price, you get one of those houses that rents for $1,000. You compare it to Utah, The average house is a comparable, is about $180,000 to $220,000. That house rents for $1,300. So you can spend half the money and almost get the same cash flow. So of course ROIs are much, much better from a cash flow strategy in Indianapolis. So this is the type of data we analyze in all of these different markets to determine where we want to be, when we want to be there, and then of course why we want to be there. This just shows the unemployment rate in Indianapolis over the last 3 years, 3+ years, and what their market's doing. This shows some before and afters of the rehab of the houses. One thing I really like about the houses there is they have land. And they're smaller houses, but the neighborhoods are phenomenal, if any of you have visited any of them. Next, we get a question often. What are the next markets? Where are you headed? Here you go, top 10 list. We are currently vetting all 10 of these markets. Some heavier than others, but we are buying in those markets. We're talking with real estate agents, property managers, rehab crews. We've been tracking, in some of those markets, tracking houses for years and seeing what the trends are and what the actuals are and how actuals translate, how paper translate to actual, right, over a long period of time. So these are some of the top markets. Does that mean the next market we open is going to be one of these 10? Not necessarily, more than likely, but again, it all depends on when. When do we need to open up that next market will greatly determine which market we open and what strategy we're going to employ, okay? In closing, a couple things that I just want to recommend. If your clients, we're halfway through the year, it's a great time for a mid-year review. It's a great time to call your project manager, get on their schedule, and sit down with them, have them analyze what's going on with your current real estate portfolio and what are the next steps. Many people are looking at their Las Vegas and their Phoenix houses and looking at, should we sell them? And if we sell them, what should we do next? What market should we go to? If you're not a client, Stephen Miller earlier talked about getting the game plan requests and sitting down with our team and having them show you what our real estate could do for your portfolio. And I highly recommend going through that process so you can just have a better understanding of how it works and what percentage of your portfolio could make sense to allocate towards our real estate program and what it could do for you. I want to end with a quote. It's all about urgency. It's about the time is now. Orlando only has a small opportunity left to do that equity play. And then it's just going to be the boring cash flow, which I really like. But it's just going to be cash flow until we have another crash. And then we'll strap on our boots and we'll run fast. And we'll let everybody know now's the time. And let's go do it. Let's go have a great run again and do that equity play. But until then, it's all about the cash flow. And the quote, I just read it today. And it says, there's no such thing as free time. There's no such thing as spare time. There's no such thing as downtime. The only time there is lifetime. Go. Thank you very much.